Alright, what's up everyone? Hello, good evening, good morning. In my last video, I had discussed how I had a reading of the first chapter of the Cosmic Pulse of Life by Trevor James Constable, but unfortunately the bass in that is so loud that it's basically unlistenable or watchable. So I'm going to do this again, but in this video, if you look over to your left, I think, you'll see that on the bottom you have pictures of UFOs from the 1950s, 40s, 60s, and 70s. And then above that, we have the many different pictures that Trevor James Constable took himself that he posted in the book using a specific specialized IR camera. And this is back in like the 1950s. And my beautiful face and Mr. Kitty's gonna be gone, and I'm going to be playing videos from the Plasmoid Anomaly Study Group, some of the anomalies that he's captured while I read. And this is like a long video of all of his videos that I screen recorded, just so that I can document him and make sure that they stay saved forever and ever, because it's simply incredible. I guess we'll just start here. This is good as any. But yes, so let me begin. Oh, also, please like, comment, and subscribe. And leave a message or leave a comment if you would like to hear the second chapter. This is The Cosmic Pulse of Life by Trevor James Constable, the revolutionary biological power behind UFOs. Chapter 1, The Great Impasse. There is no proof. There are no authorities whatsoever. No president, academy, court of law, Congress, or Senate on this earth that has the power or the knowledge to decide what will be the knowledge of tomorrow. Wilhelm Reich. Mankind has been on a collision course with other world intelligences ever since the Wright brothers lifted clear off the earth, shortly after the turn of this century. Science and technology moved farther and faster between Kitty Hawk and Hiroshima than in all the rest of human history combined. During this brief 40-year tick of the evolutionary time clock, civilization developed a technical cleverness beyond the prior conception even of visionaries. But in the more vital art of understanding himself, man made no comparable progress. Beneath man's glittering technical veneer and behind his social facade, there still throbs the black force and barbarism. Scientist and savage are separated by a paper-thin veil that is easily punctured. Atomic energy, as the major technical achievement of the first half of this century, was unlocked for the specific purpose of incinerating scores of thousands of innocents. Genocide in Europe during the Second World War and the mechanized slaughter of millions, including women, children, and the aged. Verified at mid-century, man's perilous inadequacy in handling himself, knowing himself, and facing himself. At this point in history, when men with the rockets born of war talked of conquering space and other planets, initial encounters with non-human intelligences were already occurring. The latter years of the war are rich in pioneer UFO observations by both visual and electronic means. Observations of UFO phenomena multiplied all over the world during the ensuing quarter century, but mechanistic science could contribute not one significant discovery pertaining to these objects. What was official science actually doing during this unprecedented period, when technical progress continued pell-mell and man was openly preparing for the conquest of space? Between 1946 and the present time, billions of dollars have been literally dumped into thousands of alleged research projects undertaken by official science and its minions. Professors and doctors and chemists and universities whose scientific resources dwarf those of whole nations in bygone times have been investigating everything from the fat layering of female Korean divers to the sex life of Arkansas warthogs. Federal information storage facilities are bulging with this monstrous pedantry, this fantastic plethora of inconsequential minutia. palmed off as science at the dawn of the cosmic age. Official science would look anywhere at anything, no matter how ridiculous or insignificant, provided it could look away from pressing cosmic phenomena. Amid this invasive scientism, UFOs have been manifesting throughout the world, successfully resisting all official and some ROSA efforts by mechanistic science to penetrate their secrets. Open-minded individual scientists who have tackled UFOs avocationally have been frustrated in their efforts to establish any deterministic guidelines for these multiform phenomena without departing from the official sanctioned basis of their disciplines. Mechanistic science has suffered an unmitigated defeat on the UFO problem, even as mechanism reached its peak in human influence. The history of science may be ransacked in vain for a comparable example of an established system of cognitive reaching such a total impasse. Official science is bankrupt on UFOs, methodically, ethically, and emotionally bankrupt. We are at the end of an era. For his space age, man must have a new thinking, a new mode of mention, and he must have the new knowledge, a small portion of which is being related in this book to the crucial and otherwise insolvable problems created by the advent of the UFOs. All who have enshrined mechanism as the foundation of their world conception, in or out of science, can maintain their illusion of emotional security in these times only by retreating within the armored structure of mechanism for a neurotic counterpart of Custer's Last Stand. The handwriting is on the wall. Cosmic sights and sounds are pouring in on man from space as the high priest of official science struggles to shut them out, to evade and avoid these manifestations. This invasion is responsible for the staggering resources available in America today for mechanistic scientific ventures devoid of cosmic implications, while comprehensive, honest, and honorable investigations of UFOs is economically throttled by a frightened establishment whose power is under attack at its roots. UFOs has brought with them a new source of energy, a new mode of propulsion, and the conquest of gravity. In this book, we shall penetrate the basic determinism of this energy and demonstrate why it is that the social and scientific reaction to this discovery and development has been irrational, repressive, and antagonistic. The energy cannot be put into a wire or a tank and sold. For a period of over 40 years, the majority of the world's scientists have avoided the clear responsibility they bear to the human race on the UFO question. All too many have used their professional standing and prestige to ridicule the work of those who were forced by the conceptual paralysis of mechanistic science to investigate UFOs on their own initiative. This anti-knowledge attitude came to full expression in the so-called Condign report, spawned by Colorado University. Space around the Earth has been ignored. Strange aeroforms, inexplicable to the technology we think of as advanced, continue to manifest, and their implications for world thought and human knowledge have been deliberately evaded. Hope is endemic among classical mechanistic that UFOs will just go away. Death-oriented mechanistic science reaches out instead for the corpse of the moon because the character structure of its devotees is anti-life. Every manifestation connected with UFOs, when submitted to authority of this kind, goes through the same process. The life is crushed out of it. So-called scientific controls are widely misused to this end, and already they are old history. The discovery of the Orgone energy by Dr. Wilhelm Reich, the energy that will be shown in this book to be the technical and functional principle behind UFOs, invalidates and nullifies all mechanistic conceptions of control that are not predated upon its presence. That presence is universal and demonstrable. The orgone energy is the overriding new factor in science. Authority in science has not yet recognized the discovery of the orgone energy. By the way, this is a weather balloon he's showing. Like, he knows it's a weather balloon, so please don't try and say it's not. Authority in science today also does not stand for the free and honest investigation of these strange, transcendental, and ubiquitous phenomena subsumed under the term UFOs. Authority stands for a sinister, modern obscurantism that is little different from that imposed on struggling mankind by generations of vicious theocrats. Science once had to fight clear of the same kind of reactionary control that its high priests are now using to defend their own world conceptions. The great impasse in which mechanistic science finds itself arises from the irreconcilability between living phenomena and a mode of cognitive anchored in sterility and deadness. Science is in danger of losing its ideals of serving life and rising knowledge to even higher levels because of the control exercised over its reception systems by life-hating, life-killing individuals. They rule what is acceptable. Their characteristic mode of reacting to living phenomena, their terror of life and movement, make up the psychic anatomy of the great impasse. A powerful effort by young, more vital, alive men and women will be needed to rescue science from their dominance, and this is all of us. The scope and reality of the great impasse can be demonstrated readily by reviewing the unique nexus of events amid which UFOs first impinged on mankind in the modern period, together with the resultant riddles. The most important factor attending the modern advent of UFOs is the development of radar. Mechanistic science has been unable thus far to face the devastating UFO evidence that this instrument has provided. During the Second World War, radar was developed more rapidly and to a higher degree of a refinement than any other electrical device in history. Prior to the war, radar was essentially experimental, but in the 6 years, 1939 to 1945, the technique was perfected, and by war's end, scores of thousands of radar sets were functioning on land, aboard ships, and in aircraft. The period 1939 through 1945 is, by evolutionary reckoning, no more than an instant. At this instant, planet Earth suddenly became a veritable electromagnetic hedgehog. If seen from outer space with eyes sensitive to microwave radiation, the Earth would appear to suddenly produce thousands upon thousands of jets of high-powered energy, lancing, blasting, squirting into an ether heretofore tranquil at those wavelengths. This brand new fact of Earth life coincides historically with the modern advent of UFOs. Thus far, nobody appears able to discern its implications correctly. This radiation, sudden and massive, differed from the prior electrical works of man in several fundamental ways. Radars radiated electromagnetic energy at the unprecedented power levels made possible by the development of the cavity magnetron. This British invention became the key to modern high-powered radar, which began its role in terrestrial existence barely half a century ago. Radar also uses microwaves, a portion of the electromagnetic spectrum not previously utilized in this fashion, or, for that matter, in any widespread way. Prior to the Second World War, most radars work in a band of frequencies lying between those used for television broadcasting and those visible light as perceived by the unaided human eye. Frequencies used for radar adjoin those of the infrared, the electromagnetic radiation lying before the visible red and invisible to the unaided human eye. Every UFO photograph I have ever made utilized the infrared in some way. The most important new aspect to the development of radar from the point of view of understanding UFOs was that this radar energy was pulsed, chopped into hundreds of short bursts each second. Scientists in the medical field have long known that chopping or pulsing electrical energies used for tissue stimulation increases their effects. In the portion of the electromagnetic spectrum used for radar, modern spectrum engineering has already determined that electromagnetic energy directly affects the human body through tissue penetration. Heating of the skin and nerve endings is created in this way, together with eye damage and coagulation of body proteins. There is thus an interface between man's microwave works and his own organism, as well as with the organisms of animals and insects. Coagulating of proteins is one known effect. At least 50 years of systemic work will be required to understand the full extent and implications of this interface between man's use of the spectrum and natural phenomena, especially biological phenomena. The sudden, widespread, pulsed wave activity that commenced with wartime radar did not take place in a vacuum, but in the ether. Rational scientists postulate an ether because there cannot be waves without a medium for them to wave in. Amid the triumphs of modern physics and electronics, we do well to observe that the ether itself and its qualities and properties, or even its very existence for that matter, continue to bemuse the scientific fraternity. Numerous scientists are conceptually and philosophically unhappy with Professor Einstein's etherless universe, for example. Official science being largely supportive of lifeless and sterile conceptions wherever possible. The tendency therein is to endow the ether with stationary characteristics. Physicists like the late Karl F. Kraft, who saw the ether dynamically and differently, have been denied recognition. Official scientific sequestrations of this book forced Kraft to publish his theories himself, which he did in The Ether and Its Vortices. This rare title has been reprinted by BSRF. Essays from Kraft's book were published in the appendix to W. Gordon Allen's Spacecraft from Beyond 3 Dimensions. Exposition Press, Jericho, NY, 1959. Those willing to concede that there may be a 21st century science should acquaint themselves with Kraft's little-known work. The rapid and prolific development of radar disturbed the ether as it had never been disturbed before in the terrestrial environment. This monumental fact has been ignored in ufology and not connected to the consummated advent of UFOs. Repeatedly, we shall be forced to return to this single historical event as our investigations lead us to the nature of the ether. We shall find in due course that the ether itself has been discovered as a physical natural force and presence and named orgone energy by Dr. Wilhelm Reich. A working knowledge of radar is indispensable in ufology. Most laymen still do not know how a radar set operates. Many scientists qualified in non-electrical disciplines also lack this understanding. Let us quickly describe how a radar set works. A radar functions by sending out hundreds of mighty bursts of electromagnetic microwave energy every second. These bursts of energy strike and are refracted from objects remote from the radar set. The amount of energy refracted is exceedingly small. The echo that returns to the radar set, thus only an infinitesimal portion of the energy originally radiated. The time that the pulse of energy requires to travel from the radar antenna to the target and back at 186,000 miles per second is accurately measured. This gives the range of the target. The actual physical location of the target relative to the radar antenna is displayed on cathode ray screens in various orientations. From these screens, data such as the position, speed, altitude, and course of the target may be read directly. Since only a minuscule fraction of the radiated energy is refracted back to the radar set to be measured and displayed, enormous radiated power is required. Many thousands of times more power is needed to detect an aircraft by radar than is needed to talk to the same aircraft by radio telephone. Only a few broadcasting stations are licensed today for 50,000 watts, but such a power output is common in military and naval radars. Radar differs from radio in the way in which the energy is radiated into the ether. Radio signals are focused into narrow beams only in specialized communications, but radar depends upon a focused beam of energy. The radiation of the energy from a radar antenna becomes like a long electromagnetic finger, which men are able to stick up into the air and extend across the surface of the sea. With this finger, they are able to feel electronically for objects that they cannot see with their eyes. The electronic finger penetrates fog, mist, and cloud. Radar is thus at once an extension of man's sight and an extension of his sense of touch. Developed primarily for long-range detection of enemy aircraft, the crude radars of 1939 through 1940 were quickly superseded by units of ever-increasing complexity, efficiency, and capability. When these sensitive electronic feelers were directed into the air, they detected aircraft with great precision over previously unobtainable distances. The military learned to control the aerial defense of large territories with the aid of radar. All this new type feeling around, however, led to the detection of other things, not aircraft, and in the process landed official science in a highly embarrassing jackpot. To this day, science has been unable either to escape from or to conceptually confront these strange other things that were not and are not aircraft. Many of the objects detected with this all-new instrument prove to be invisible to the eye, even within known visual range. In his book, Flying Saucer Conspiracy, published by Henry Holt and Company of New York, Major Donald Keyhole recounted what is probably the most significant of all wartime radar detections of UFOs. There were between 200 and 300 objects involved. All of them were ocularly invisible, called the Nancy Shuto case because of its occurrence near the islands of South Okinawa. The event is one instance worth 1,000. The essential elements are sufficient for us here. The story was given to Major Keyhole by a U.S. Navy officer, synonymously identified as James Dawson, who had served as a Combat Information Center officer aboard an aircraft carrier during the incident. Patrolling the area south of Okinawa in company with another aircraft carrier, Dawson's ship detected with radar a huge force of enemy aircraft approaching from the northeast. Initial radar contact was 120 miles. The blimp or echo returning from the incoming force was very large, supporting an estimate of 200 to 300 aircraft. At 100 miles range, their speed was determined to be 650 knots. nearly 700 miles per hour. No known aircraft in the world at that time could obtain such a speed. At 80 miles and at the altitude of 12,000 feet, the incoming force of aircraft began to spread out into formations from the main body, as though preparing to assault the whole American task force. Only 12 aircraft were available as air cover for the U.S. ships, all other American aircraft being absent on strikes against Japanese positions in the Ryukyus. These 12 fighters were scrambled and vectored by Dawson towards the attacking force. In bright weather, with only scattered clouds at 5,000 feet, the American fighter pilots enjoyed unrestricted visibility. At 15,000 feet on intercept, they could see 50 miles, but they never did see the incoming 200 to 300 enemy aircraft. Directed accurately from the carrier to intercept the enemy, the veteran Navy fighter pilots could not see the attacking force, even when directly above them, as seen on the carrier radar. The enemy, nevertheless, kept coming towards the task force. Now at general quarters for the impending attack, Dawson warned the bridge by telephone that the enemy was almost upon them. The skipper told him he was crazy, that there was nothing to be seen in the sky. Radar still showed the horde of attackers. The incredulous Dawson went on deck himself and saw nothing. The fighter directed on the other carrier and also picked up the enemy machines on his radar. According to Major Kehoe, the U.S. Navy acknowledged after the war that there had been this inexplicable ghost of Nancy Shuto. There had been numerous neurotic attempts to verbalize away this significant incident, although there have been numerous subsequent incidents of similar character that have not been publicized. The fact to be faced are: UFOs were detected at speeds exceeding those obtainable by enemy aircraft in that period and theater of war. There was simultaneous detection by two independent operating radars aboard two different ships. UFOs were invisible to 12 experienced Navy pilots at the peak of their powers, as well as to the shipboard personnel, all of them being trained to observe and deal with attack from the air. All of them were in a position to make a visual sighting, but were unable to do so. When man stuck his pulsing electronic finger into the heavens, he was not prepared either to find or to accept anything other than what he was specifically seeking. Revolution was upon him. The instruments, fashioned by his own cleverness, had led him to an impasse from which only a new mode of thinking would provide release. Similar cases to the Nansem Shuto incident have occurred all over the world since. The stratagem of pigeonholing such unwelcome, unwanted, and mechanistically incomprehensible evidence has failed. The manifestations continue as this is written. Official science is conceptually strapped, having devised an exquisite instrument to locate invisible airborne things. Surely it is downright queer that men of science recoil from that instrument's evidential yield. Radar designers did not anticipate that their devices would detect objects that were completely invisible. The great impasse has developed its bulk and immobility out of this fact. No machinist will ever get around that impasse with the old thinking. New mental resources are needed to deal with what is demonstrably supersensible yet capable of firm objectification. Radar is telling people of science now, as it has told them times without numbers since the war. Pressed down and running over, that there are at work in the atmosphere of the earth and beyond invisible objects that are nevertheless physical. Giving all this names such as propagation anomalies does nothing but divert attention from the matter, Calling them angels provides only uneasy chuckles unworthy of men of truth. This is one of my favorite lines. Calling them angels provides only uneasy chuckles unworthy of men of truth. Evidence of the invisible reality around us points to the collapse of the mechanical, mystical conceptions of the cosmos. The neurotic Weltanschauung that is the emotional underpinning of both official science and organized religion. The choice for man is not between finding a new way or hanging on to the old, but one of how to find the new way in full health and clarity of mind, invisible yet physical. Whether or not you can live with such a concept concerning UFOs and accept its consequences for your own worldview will largely determine your posture in the space age. Such big facts. There's an old, morbid, and fossilized order in science, the strictly mechanistic priesthood that has won great benefits for mankind, and the new scientists who pursue scientific truth wherever it leads. The old order still winds the clock and will continue to do so for perhaps another decade. Then the new people will leave behind the small behavior of the old-timers toward the great drama of cosmic cosmos that is now opening, and renew the earth through the immense catharsis of that drama. The high priest of official science cannot be converted. The task is comparable to converting a wheelchair arthritic into a 2 rounds a day golfer, or to getting people under 30 years of age into the US Congress. The rigid older minds will rule for the time being under their political and scientific suzerainty. Opinions inimical to further investigation of UFOs in their invisible aspects can be purchased from official science by a doomed establishment. This process is no more difficult than purchasing potatoes at a supermarket, just considerably more elaborate and costly. The analysis of new facts with old thinking or with underdeveloped thinking has caused the great impasse to extend itself even into ufology. UFO literature cites abundant cases of invisibility and even more instances of objects making transitions from visible to invisible. Dutifully recorded, these dynamic happenings and their implications have been largely evaded by ufology. Invisible UFOs are seemingly a source of disquiet and even annoyance to most ufologists bent upon mechanistic theories and their proof. Attention is directed preferentially upon cases where objects deemed to be craft have been observed with the naked eye in aerial maneuvers or in landings. Objects of this type do not stretch their rigid's mind farther than from A to B. Mechanical concepts compatible with mechanistic science can be comfortably applied, albeit indecisively, to objects that appear to be solid. Emotional security, which is threatened and jeopardized by anything implying intradimensionality. Oh, damn it, interdimensionality. Okay. Emotional security, which is threatened and jeopardized by anything implying interdimensionality or lack of fixity within the physical sphere of observation, is thereby maintained. Convincing of beings on other planets as building spaceships and flying across space to Earth does not disturb the mechanist emotionally, because such thinking is linear, i.e., it goes in a straight line. Objects that are physical but invisible have, by contrast, enormous power to disturb. Routine, linear thinking cannot cope with such radical concepts because they are destructive of the mechanistic rubric. The living, functional elements immanent everywhere in UFO phenomena elude their linear mind and cannot be handled by engineering principles, since they are biological and bioenergetic. Empirical approaches to UFOs based on life instead of sterility automatically violate mechanistic method and outrage the linear-minded mechanist. Ships from other planets is the limit of his tolerance. Only one firm instance of a phenomenon is sufficient to justify scientific investigation. Firm instances of radar sightings unconfirmed by visual means, when such confirmation should have been obtainable under known laws of physics and optics, number into the hundreds, involving service aircraft and highly trained personnel. They are high-quality observations, but are suppressed by Department of Defense security. Interceptions have been made by radar-equipped fighters, and the interceptions confirmed from ground radar. While in some cases UFOs have been machine-gunned and pieces shot off for later recovery and analysis, the crucial cases are those where the intercepting aircraft finds nothing in the air at the point of interception and is seen by ground radar to fly right through an apparently massive airborne object. These events have taken place repeatedly at the dawn of the space age, while the aerospace industry has been plundering the treasury for stupendous amounts of money for space research. Whatever it is in space around us, picked up on radars, sighted by our best pilots, photographed by our astronauts, and easily outperforming the most advanced products of earthly engineering, has never been considered worthy of thorough investigation. This irrational attitude condemns itself. The Crossroe-rich American Research Foundation, swollen with tax-sheltered funds, the U.S. government's, our great universities, and the aerospace industry have all avoided investigating propulsion of this type in favor of juvenile fireworks for adults at Cape Kennedy. The ultimate in mechanistic crudity and mind-numbing complexity, these operations consume billions of dollars and delude us into thinking we are smart. That large numbers of UFOs are invisible is a fact beyond rational dispute, and it is the terrors attendant on this fact that have provoked the irrational in man. One of the few certainties in ufology is that mankind became aware of these invisible objects only with the advent of radar. From this, it may be fairly inferred that such objects have always been present, unseen in the terrestrial environment. A high probability exists that these objects are an integral part of the life of the Earth. That is why they must be faced in full scientific honesty, and their determinism established. Mechanistic science always casts its evolutionary vote for accident and coincidence rather than letting phenomena speak in their own way to modern consciousness. The realm of the microbe existed for scores of millennia as a condition of terrestrial life and as integral with and essential to that life as the sun. Microbes only entered human consciousness when the microscope removed man's optical limitations. Radar has performed a similar function macrotellurically extending man's sense of touch into an adjacent yet invisible and seemingly interpenetrating realm. Radar has opened to human consciousness the signal possibility of transitions from one state of tangibility to another, supported by those numerous UFO sightings where visible objects literally disappear while in full view. These cases also have involved highly trained, experienced personnel using modern equipment. A classic encounter of this type took place in March 1953 when UFOs were detected by radar over Detroit, Michigan. The case involved USAF F-94B jets under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Howard C. Strand. This officer's story, as told to UFO investigators Brad Sturger and Joanne Ritternor, was published in Saga magazine in August 1968. In February of this year, the authors were in Chicago to tape the pilot film of a new television series, UFOs, Here and Now. At this time, it was our pleasure to meet and spend some time with the Lieutenant Colonel Howard C. Brand, base commander of the Detroit Air National Guard. Lieutenant Colonel Strand has over 7,000 hours of military flying time, more than half in jets. Strand is an honest, straight from the shoulder military man. He is soft-spoken, a gentleman, officer of the old school. He most certainly is not the sort of man to fabricate a story to bring attention to himself. On a clear spring day in 1953, Lieutenant Colonel Strand encountered a number of UFOs while flying over Detroit. At that time, he was on active duty in the Air Force flying F-94B aircrafts and was stationed at Selfridge, AFB, Michigan. He had not been a believer in flying saucers prior to that sighting, and even today he devotes no time to ufology, other than to do selective reading on the subject. Lieutenant Colonel Strand has only had that single experience in 1953. It is a particularly impressive sighting made by a highly qualified observer. Here is Lieutenant Colonel Strand's story. Approximately 10 a.m. one morning in March 1953, I was scrambled on a routine patrol mission. We were expecting the Navy to try and penetrate our air defense in the local area for practice purposes. After about 20 minutes of flight, the radar site controlling our flight gave us a target to our left at about 8 o'clock position. Upon visual checking, my airborne radar operator and I could see tiny specks in the sky which appeared as a ragged formation of aircraft. Our position at the time was approximately 3 miles northwest of downtown Detroit. The targets appeared to be over the city's central section. The objects were a little lower than our aircraft, so we were in a slight downhill run at full military power, without afterburners on the intercept. I could recall thinking more than once I should be able to start identifying the aircraft any second, but couldn't. Their tails, wings, and aircraft features just didn't seem to pop out as they normally do when you close in on an aircraft to identify its type. All the while, we were on a quartering head-on intercept. My radar operator in the back seat was trying to pick up the targets on our airborne radar. The ground radar had both our aircraft and the unknowns painted as good, strong targets, but we were still unable to get any positive identification, and the objects seemed to be getting a little larger all the time. About this time, the radar operator in the back seat started receiving some returns on his scope and thought he was picking up the targets. I was watching the objects until I looked in the cockpit, trying to inch out a little more speed without going into afterburner. When I looked up again, after no more than 2 to 4 seconds, the objects were gone. I had estimated the number of UFOs to be between 12 and 16. We had been expecting to find and identify Navy fighter type aircraft, but now nothing. Every one of the objects has disappeared from sight. Immediately, I asked the ground radar controller where they were, and he told us the targets were still there, loud and clear. We continued to fly the heading given by the controller, right into the center of the targets. We flew and turned in every direction, but there was still nothing in sight. Gradually, the targets disappeared from ground radar after we had been amongst them for 3 or 4 minutes, as close as 2,000 feet according to radar. Our airborne radar had picked up nothing after the initial fleeting contact before the objects had disappeared from visual sight. No UFO report was submitted by the aircrew for one reason. This was the era when it seemed the Air Force was denying even the possibility of UFOs and was attempting to make everyone who thought that they had seen such objects look silly and stupid. In retrospect, I have personally come to 2 conclusions about my sightings. Number 1, that I could not identify the objects as aircraft because they weren't. There were no wings or tails to pop into sight for identification as aircraft. At that time, I had no thoughts of flying saucers, therefore I made no effort to identify them as such. If I had even so much as thought of it at the time, I would have never taken my eyes off them. I can say definitely that the objects were not conventional or jet aircraft, due to the fact that no aircraft could have turned around or gotten away, so to speak, in the 2 to 4 seconds I was looking in the aircraft cockpit. Remember, all the while we were bearing down on the objects at approximately 500 miles per hour in a quartering head-on pass. Number 2, that the objects went straight up out of sight. To me and my airborne radar operator, but still visible as targets on the ground radar. Other sightings have been made where UFOs have gone straight up for tens of hundreds of thousands of feet in 1 or 2 seconds, then hovered or moved slowly at a new altitude. At the time of the sighting, I had 1,700 hours flying time occurred in 9 years. Today, I still feel the sighting on that perfectly clear day in 1953 was valid, that it was no figment of the imagination or trick of eyesight. I have had no other sightings since that time. Serious thinkers on the UFO subject owe Lieutenant Colonel Strand a debt for making his experience available for study. The case is one that is worth 10 million words of invasive jabberwocky from official science, or 25 years of intellectualizing. Let us hope that the high priests do not force Colonel Strand to recant facts stated so cleanly and clearly. Those facts must be faced. Man requires for the period of human development now opening a mode of mentation that will permit his thinking to follow with ease and in total harmony with his cosmic origin. Transitions of substance from one level of tangibility to another. Such a transition obviously occurred in this Detroit case. Why cannot man follow such transitions? Man lives inside an armored organism. Man lives inside an armored organism, a rigid structure intended to protect him from painful stimuli and also from his own natural organ sensations. In his musculature, this armor is a demonstrable biophysical reality. Half strangled by his armor, the somatic anchorings of his neurosis, armored man is much less than half a man. He is 90% inefficient. How then does this situation determine his relationship to UFOs, or rather, his inability to relate to UFOs? Mankind in the mass and the overwhelming majority of individuals cannot at the present time tolerate the organismic movement of biological energy because of the armoring process. The armor stops bioenergetic movement and throttles or diverts organ sensations, including those connected with vision. UFOs have their technical roots in the same biological energy, orgone energy, that is trying to move in man and move man forward. UFOs as a cosmic manifestation are already cracking up armor, and with it, the mass neurosis in all its retardative social manifestations. Man's intolerance of bioenergetic movement is exemplified in his intolerance of firm UFO evidence that is biological or bioenergetic. What is alive in UFOs stimulates through resonance and correspondence that which is alive in man. He cannot stand this movement. His own biological energy, with its prime bodily expression in the sexual processes, is inhibited by social religious taboos imposed for thousands of years. Those taboos have hamstrung and blocked man at a time when his technical electrical cleverness has led him to cut across and to become aware of a hitherto unsuspected biological realm. Man must therefore face himself before he can face intelligently the cosmic beings upon whose dimensions he has begun to impinge technically with ever-increasing intensity. Man's armoring against life and against the movement of his own life energy is responsible for the process of evasion that has characterized official science in its attitudes to UFOs. Evasion of facts intimately interwoven with the cosmic life energy, the energy that is central to the UFO mystery, is neurotic and anti-life. The unscientific evasion of radar evidence demonstrates its irrationality. The UFO problem lies not in a lack of hard data, but in the orientation of armored man away from anything that leads to the roots of his own existence. That is where UFOs understood and approached. All right, inevitably led. That is where UFOs understood and approached, and inevitably led to. To Wilhelm Reich, we owe the elucidation of all this irrationalism. Understanding his discovery of the orgone energy brings automatic understanding that one may follow UFOs only functionally, that is, in ordinance with living processes and their continual dynamic transitions. Fixed, anchored, rigidized conceptions are worthless in any attempt to understand the dynamic diversity of UFOs. These strange flying things have to be permitted to speak to us in their own way, and their language for now is the mode of their manifestation. Functional thinking and functional mythology are required before we can begin to understand UFOs and all that they portend for mankind. A comprehensive UFO theory stands outside the boundaries of what is obtainable by mechanistic science, no matter what resources are employed. Cosmic dynamics and mechanistic rigidity are incompatible and always will be. Mechanistic science has produced incredible wonders and benefits for the human race, but it is an inadequate tool for cosmic investigation. So is the mind sterilized by its lifeless conceptions. There is no way that such minds can comprehend or cope with the cosmic dynamics that UFOs now thrust at us from space. The task is for a new generation of free, functionally minded, vitally alive young men and women who will be pro-life when they approach UFOs. They have the task, as this book will show in due course, of snatching Earth evolution literally. They have the task, as this book will show in due course, of snatching Earth's evolution literally from the clutches of the devil. of surmounting the great impasse. Right. So that was chapter 1. Yeah, that was a lot to read. The way that he speaks is so like, or writes, is literally like just so heady, right? Like it just, I don't know, the way that he just like laces his words up, just it's almost like a tongue twister, honestly. And also, I haven't read in a while, and it's late, so I do apologize if my reading didn't sound as like into it, but I assure you that I was enjoying what I was reading, and I was listening to or understanding what I was reading. And also, you guys can read along. I have the book set up right there for you all to read for yourself. But yeah, so that is the first chapter, and I really do hope if you guys enjoyed that, let me know in the comments, and I will do chapter 2. Maybe I'll just do the entire book and just have like each chapter down. That would be awesome if I could do every single one of his books, because sadly, like the only book that's on Audible right now is the Cosmic Pulse of Life, but all of his other ones you have to read, straight up book. But I don't really have that many books. I got this one right here, which is pretty good. I think like most people know about this book, Be Here Now. Which is it's alright. I really haven't read it that much. And then the other one that I love is this one, Christopher Dunn, showing basically all of the advanced structures at the Giza complex, the precision, which is obviously machined, and also theorizing that the pyramids were actually some sort of energy propagation mechanism, which you guys know from my video that I just released is looking like it is on course to be like what's actually going on, right? Like these things were somehow or another utilizing the piezoelectric forces created by the immense pressure from these massive machines, crushing that granite and creating electroids, which then spark ball lightning, or i.e. earthquake lights, plasma. And here's the thing, plasma is conscious, or it can be conscious, and it can have different levels of consciousness, I believe. And I think that that's what fundamentally is in the UFO phenomena, is that there are ranges of consciousness. You can have some UFOs that could possibly just be like an amoeba, right? Like just reacting, similar to what we see in the STS missions, right? When you see all those things going towards that electromagnetically charged tether that was 12 miles long, just floating in space, right? They filmed that tether. And what did they see? All of a sudden, they start seeing these plasmas, changing directions, merging, morphing, But yeah, your your standards will be like, oh, it's just dust and ice. That's all it is. And it's like, so how do you explain them changing directions or stopping on a dime in space? Like that, dude. Oh, the cognitive dissonance in this topic is just so horrible, and it literally hurts my soul to see it in humanity. And it really makes me think of that movie Idiocracy, where like people are just willingly being retarded and not thinking fully, right? They'll accept whatever talking head or whatever's on the news or whatever the academic blah 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 says, and they'll never research a topic for themselves, right? And so then they're basically putting themselves in a jail, right? In a small little thinking box that is being provided by the powers that be, who we, know aren't really the best kinds of people, right? Like they do a lot of bad stuff, right? But maybe, hopefully, doing this, I can help wake up a few people, and that's all that really matters. And then also for future generations, right? If this stuff just becomes like a known thing, then I can be like, look, I was on it, before all of you guys. Or, you know, in the future, you know, somebody could find this video and it would spark them on their own journey of self-discovery. And I think that the information and basically the path of thinking that I've laid out is, for me, like one of the most coherent, right? When you go into the ancient mounds, the ancient megalithic structures, and then you start tying that in with, you know, the earthquake lights and stuff like that. And it even goes all the way up to Mars. And this is tangible data and evidence, right? Like, hopefully people start realizing. But if not, I enjoy getting this stuff out because unfortunately I don't really have anybody to talk about this to, because I currently live in a very religious part of the United States, and I would say that this stuff is quite literally heresy. I don't know, maybe not, who knows. But I do hope that you guys enjoy this, and yeah, I cannot wait for my next video to come out for everybody to see. So this is From Thought, and again, like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you. Much love. Peace out.